for joining us in person, and hello to everyone online. So today we're going to talk pitch and storytelling. Michelle Sklar from Innovation UBC is here, and you're in for a treat. She's the both passionate, intelligent, and also like energetic. So it's like the whole package. We're very lucky to have Michelle here. And pitch and storytelling together is intentional because you might be able to give a good pitch, but you can't always tell the story. And I think if both go together, if you can do both well, that will do you very well when you're communicating your startup and your company. So that's the topic for today. I think we have a couple kind of opening admin slides that I'll take you through, and then I'll pass it over to Michelle. Housekeeping, there's some water at the back if you need it. And the restrooms are just out the door to the left, and come and go as you need. So, okay. I don't know where to start. One sec. Okay, first I would like to respectfully acknowledge we are on the ancestral unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, the Namusqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. I heard this amazing grounding ceremony yesterday at the Vancouver Entrepreneurs Forum event with Elder Roberta, and she also added the word, I think she said, unceded, traditional, and occupied, which it is, territory. So I think I'm going to add that to my future land acknowledgements, but happy to be here and grateful. Okay, so New Ventures BC, we are competition, we are an accelerator, we run intellectual property programs, we are a nonprofit. So we can't do anything without supporters and sponsors. So title sponsor is Innovate BC, Provincial Crown Corporation. We are also part of Innovate BC's led Road to Web Summit event. So these are a series of events happening all across the ecosystem to tell startup founders about the Web Summit event coming to Vancouver at the end of May. Gold sponsors, EY and Baskin. Silver, RBCX, SFU Beauty School, Talk Shop Media, and Vantech Angels, and lots of great bronze and media sponsors listed here. Mentioned the Web Summit. So I don't know if I've actually wrote this in full, but essentially the Web Summit, they're basically events to help you get ready. So if you don't know what the Web Summit is, it's basically a big tech conference. There'll be lots of investors, speakers, and people to meet with, and it's an international conference. So particularly if you're looking for international networking, it's a pretty good opportunity. And then I believe the startup program, they have a startup program that you can apply for until April 20th. Oh, that's like in 3 days. So you can apply up until then. I believe over 250 BC companies are going. So if that's something you're on the fence of, now's the time to decide. And then I believe this is the next Road to Web Summit event coming up. This is with our friends at the Indigenous Text. Okay. Oh, giving away the so in terms of the format, Michelle's going to just give some best practices around pitching storytelling for the first just under an hour. Then we're going to make you do a little work. So we'll do breakout rooms online, groups out here for about 15-20, and then we'll do a final kind of wrap up and a little more lecture.
No more lecture.
Okay.
No more lecture.
Okay. So the best way to become a good pitcher is to practice. So that's kind of what that part is. So other than that, did I miss anything?
No,
I'm gonna give it to Michelle.
Awesome. Thank you. I know that. There we go. Okay. Let me just make sure I can. Oh, so it's upside down. Okay. We might be going analog, folks. We might be going analog. Let's see.
There we go.
Okay, good. So just a second, don't go anywhere yet. Okay, great, excellent. Okay, awesome. Hello. So my name is Michelle Sklar, and I'm really grateful to be here today to connect with all of you and talk about one of my very, very, very favorite passionate topics, which is around storytelling. And so currently I roll with UBC. I've been head of marketing communications there I started as an entrepreneur in residence with the UBC Entrepreneurship Program, and then I guess through happenstance or whatever the case may be, I now head up marketing and communications for sort of a broader innovation UBC portfolio. And so all day long, I am just inspired and surrounded by incredible innovators. I'm also the chair of the Vancouver Entrepreneurs Forum, and I've been involved with BF for the last couple of years. I am a very active person. I'm a big community builder. I love everything that we do at UBC, but I guess it's not enough, and I need to kind of always broaden my horizons. And honestly, my origin story is my first company. I was in my early mid-20s, and it was a very, very, very long time ago, and the internet had kind of just gone commercial. And our first startup, we were acquired. It was a terrible, 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 miserable experience. It scarred me for a very long time. And I think it's because there was no community and nobody taught me how to tell a story, and I didn't understand how to connect with people. There was no resources. And so cut to, many decades later, and here we are, and we get to have these kinds of opportunities to connect and learn from one another. So that's kind of what I'm hoping we'll be able to accomplish today. A little bit of my own housekeeping. I ask you to keep an open mind. We are going to do some interactive stuff a little bit later on in the session. Same with online. All I ask is that, you just sort of be willing to test some of these things out. And so I feel that the more you can participate in something, it just allows you to kind of work out that story. And that's really what today is all about. Consider this a safe space. You can be vulnerable. We're all learning together. It's a great place to begin. And of course, virtually, I'll let you kind of take care of making sure that everyone knows, who you are. I encourage you, if your video is not on, that when we get into the interactive sessions that you do have your video on. It's just going to be a way better experience. And I think we're covered off there. Okay, so just kind of framing out what it is that we're going to learn today, just some objectives. So today is going to be about what is it about storytelling that's so important? What are some of the mechanics of storytelling, and how does it actually allow you to kind of build those connections, right? We're going to talk about how to clarify our messaging. Why should we clarify our messages? We have different audiences that we may be targeting, and that's okay. We can adjust our messages. And then hopefully some practical strategies along the way, things that you can kind of practice here, take home, practice some more. Kind of have a bit of a part one and a part two. So as I mentioned, I'm going to get into the why. I spent a lot of time on why. I think the why is that's the center of the universe as far as I'm concerned. And if you're not clear on your why, it's so hard for anything to come from that. And when you get super clear on your why, it just all becomes very natural and things just roll. So a lot of that. And then I also like to talk about the objectives of messaging. So I mentioned you may have different audiences, or you want to get different things out of the folks that you're connecting with. So being clear on those objectives is important. And then we've got an exercise at the end that's actually more of a sort of pitch part as well. And we'll get into that. Okay, so why is storytelling important? Okay, so I think that for me, storytelling really roots in the fact I'm passionate about stories. I love television. I love movies. I love books. I love anything that is a great story. And one of the things I think that I really love about stories is that they really help me sort of transform and think about being someplace else, right? And stories are things that we've been telling for centuries, right? So many different kinds of stories over so many, so much time. So while we've always told stories, and we probably have really great stories that are part of our own, kind of histories and whatnot, the way in which we tell stories has changed over time. And I think that even more recently, the challenge is there's so much noise out there, and there's so many different ways that you can have your story being told. And so this is a little bit about how do you kind of rise above that, and how do you get really good at storytelling so when it's noisy, you actually can stand out. So the thing is that, your story is really rooted in your vision and your strategy. It's about the impact of, why and how you're solving that problem. And it's about your growth mindset and action, right? And so sometimes that growth mindset can feel a little bit challenging to temper because you're thinking about conquering the world, but right now you got to figure out how to keep the, heat, light, and rent going, right? And so that growth mindset is important, but sometimes you kind of got to, contain it in certain parts and certain stages of your journey. And also, I really like to acknowledge that a good story, a good narrative means that it also is reflecting not just your customers, but the people on your team, the networks that you have. If you think about brands or whatnot, or shopping experiences or dining experiences that you may have really enjoyed, it's the person that you're connecting with, right? And if that connection is good, chances are it's because they also really enjoy where they're working, and that mission and vision and values is always coming through. So I just see a lot of these things, very deeply connected. All right. So I'd like to start with brand identity. And this is something that one question I forgot to ask people before we get too far down the line here. Are all of you, did all of you apply to the competition? Could I have a show of hands of who, and others of you are here because you just like a good storytelling session? Yeah, okay, excellent, great. So brand identity. That is something that you can think about in terms of your company, but it's also something you can think in terms of yourself. So feel free to sort of like make that transition as necessary. But your brand really needs to be rooted in your why, your what, your how. It's the secret to your storytelling. It's the collective personality. It's the collective voice. It's the visual identity. It's literally the full package of everything, right? When we talk about brand, it's not just about a logo. It's truly about the ethos and the belief system that you have about the thing that you're building. And more importantly, it's bigger than you. It will potentially live on well beyond you or not. And one of the things I will also often like to note for people is, because a brand is so important and because it can be bigger than you, try not to compare yourself to other brands. We are the, Lululemon of, or the Facebook of, or whatever the case may be, because things can go in and out of fashion all the time. And you want people to remember the authenticity of you and your brand and not think about how it might reflect on someone else's brand. I always like to really make sure that people are super clear, like go all in on your brand. And that's what we're going to be talking a little bit more about today. So also like to, talk a little bit about what's the difference between positioning and storytelling, right? So positioning is about, how what you do is like the best solution for the problem at hand, right? It answers the question of like, why you, why now? But storytelling it's the piece that is rooted in that position, right? So why you, why now? Once you start to tell your story, that's when you're getting into the details of like, why you, why now, right? And there's lots of stories that we tell for lots of different reasons. They show up in different places. It could be a blog, it could be a pitch, it could be on social media, it could be a white paper, but all these things will be rooted in the key position, right? The key things that you know that you stand for, and everything flourishes from there. So it has to really be grounded in who loves your solution best and why. And that's really key for, why you right now. You want to be able to make sure that you can communicate to people why they should feel that way about you right now. And that's kind of how positioning and storytelling really work together. Okay, so getting into some of our story building blocks here. Your why, your what, your how. And I appreciate that many of you here, may have an MBA, or you've run businesses for, many years, or you're doing all sorts of things where the why, what, and how isn't anything that's new. But it amazes me how often people will just get really far away from that when they need to be super close to it for telling their story. When you don't know if you should go left or right, if you don't know if you should choose 1, 2, or 3, you should always go back to the why, the what, the how. If you're not sure if this is something that your customer really needs to know about, then you've got to be able to answer, does it answer the why, the what, and the how? And that's really the framework that when you are thinking about these key positioning pieces of your journey, and as you're starting to tell your story, you always want to be answering these questions. And if you can't answer that question, then you need to move it to the side. So as we get into that, your why is about, why did you start your business? Why did you start this thing that, now is just a fast moving train and it's off to the races, right? So really thinking about that, why you started the thing that you're doing. People need to see that in your story. They need to experience that. They really need to see that you have this like lived experience, or, real believability in the thing that you're doing, because now it's your life's work. And that really needs to show up, because that's the magic that starts to really shape the story that you're going to be telling. And your why really drives the direction and focus. It's your North Star. So like I mentioned, you need to be able to answer this question of why, how, what all the time, right? That North Star will just make sure that you keep yourself focused. At UBC, I certainly work with a lot of very, very highly technical research-based ventures. They use really big, long words all the time. And generally I can't get past, the first syllable. And so in order for a person who's developing a very complex solution to something, it's got a very complex problem that they're solving, it can be really easy to get mired in that complexity, right? But you got to pull yourself back and think about, why are you doing this thing? And that will help to simplify your story, because it really helps to communicate to people why this is so important and why they need to pay attention. Welcome. Come on in. Hey, how are you? Hi. Cool. Awesome. Your values are a big part of what needs to show up in your story as well, because it's your core belief system, right? The language that you use, how you talk about the thing that you're actually, building, how you think about the world with the lens of your business kind of layered over it. Your core belief system is really important. That informs so much about how you think about that story and who you want to tell that story to, who's really, really important, who really needs to know this story. They're going to connect most with that belief system. And it's going to drive your behaviors. It's going to drive your decisions. It's going to drive how you treat your customers, how you treat your potential investors, your partners, your team members. It's very important. That values-based is what allows you to make really good decisions, because it's rooted in something tangible. And when you create alignment with a customer, or you create alignment with someone on your team or another partner, then you're actually going to have a common language that you share anyhow. And that's going to make that storytelling feel that much better. I always like to include here, as I mentioned, like, this is going to form the basis of your culture, right? You know that if you are a person that, you are a big thinker, you love to be outdoors, you're a very active person, you like to, do lots of things on whiteboards and really kind of, encourage these very creative environments, that creativity, that kind of free flowing thinking, like that's a good value, right? And you want people to be able to be part of that value, because they can see alignment in it. And so values show up in stories all the time. Going back to your how. So this is getting to the core of your value proposition, right? And we talk often about like a 10-word value proposition, right? How can you distill what you're saying into something that's actually that simple and really captures the value of what you're doing? And it's from that you can start to really unfold that story. Literally 10 words, and then start the story from there. The other thing that's very important in positioning is thinking about, benefits versus features, and really understanding that differentiator. And so normally I do this session in the morning, and I have this great big coffee cup at home that I really like. And my point being is that, I don't really care what color my coffee mug is, but the fact that it has a handle is a real benefit, because if it didn't, I would burn my hands, right? People don't always care about like the color of something or the new, on-off switch that you may have added, unless it's a real benefit. People can get lost in the details of a story if they don't really have clarity on the benefits, right? Oftentimes, I see this often with PowerPoint decks and whatnot, and people are just throwing the kitchen sink in that deck, everything. It's too much. You've got to actually want people to want to learn more, right? You want them to actually ask you questions. You want to invite them into the story, right? So having that value proposition that's super clear, it's actually going to be that thing that starts to engage, and then you can kind of start to give more information and more information. So that's where your benefits really show up in your solution, and how that solution is making an impact. And lastly, what's really important in your positioning, and we're going to get into this in our exercise a little bit later on, but it's clarity, consistency, and accessibility. So when you think about your value proposition, or when you think about your 10-slide deck, or whatever it is that you're creating, can it actually answer the question, were you clear? Were you consistent with your language? And is it accessible to people, right? I often, I talk about the mom test. My mom is 82. I've mentioned I've been in, tech for 30 plus years at this point. For me, if my mom can understand what it is that I'm doing, I've totally nailed it, right? So if you can tell your story to somebody that knows nothing about what you do, and they can repeat back to you what you do, then you've told a really good story. And that's what I mean about accessibility. And this is really important, especially, well, in all cases, if I go back to the examples of some of the deep tech companies that we work with at UBC, or complex businesses, I shall say, or complex projects. What becomes important is that oftentimes the person that you are telling your story to here isn't necessarily the person that's going to be making the buying decision, right? Or the person that actually like writes the checks. So what happens is you tell your story to what your customer or the front facing customer that you have, and then they have to go and take your story and tell the person that's in charge of procurement. So if they're not really clear on exactly what they're asking for, they're going to get a big no from procurement. So this is an important consideration, that your story can be told by other people, which would be great. So the simpler it is and the more accessible language that you have, then the more likely people are going to remember your story and they're going to be able to pass it on. It's like a game of telephone. It may get diluted a little bit, but imagine if you're starting super clear, you've got a much better chance of it actually landing the way you had intended it. So I think we all know Arlene Dickinson. I mentioned earlier about like the authenticity of the story, right? This is about your story, your why is the thing that's bigger than you that you want people to buy into, right? And it really is that authenticity. And so examples of things that are inauthentic are if you start saying things like, we're the only company in the world that does this. And the fact is, you don't know that for sure. You are the number one, solution for this problem, but do you actually know that for sure? So authenticity is believability, but believability has to be rooted in truths. It has to be rooted in accountability, right? And of course, understanding your audience, which we're going to get to some of those messaging objectives, understanding your audience, understanding who you're actually really trying to win over to what you're doing, right? That needs to be an authentic conversation designed for them. That authenticity should never leave what you're doing. It should be something that as you grow your businesses, that authenticity is something that your teams are now carrying forward, because it really is going to start with the leadership. And it's really that thing that's going to make your story sing, is if it's believable and people can really connect with it. So now I'm going to talk a little bit more about kind of some guidelines for strong positioning, right? Because we talked about the fact that the story itself has to hang on something. It has to hang on 4 or 5 key reasons why you're doing what it is that you're doing, or how you're doing what it is that you're doing, or what your unique differentiator is. And if you are maybe not as familiar with the concept of, positioning statements and storytelling and whatnot, just think about like writing down 4 or 5 things that basically are going to add up to, why you're doing the thing that you're doing. And start with that. And as you do that, you'll be able to refine, you'll be able to finesse, right? And you'll start to get a very, very, very solid story. So some guidelines to help you do that are thinking about your brand promise, knowing your audience, and really painting a picture. So brand promise. I mentioned a previous example of like, you don't say something that you're not, don't compare yourselves to companies that you're not, like, those should always be fundamentals, because your credibility is rooted in that, right? Like the thing with being, are all of you in here founders or co-founders? Yeah, okay. Being a founder, it's your heart's on your sleeve. It is the most vulnerable thing you will ever do in your life. So all you have is your credibility. Like that's it. Doesn't matter. So being really authentic and being really clear and being really truthful in what you're doing is essential, because your entire life's work relies on your own credibility, right? But you've got to be able to communicate that, with a strong vision, and you have to own it, right? Again, the authenticity, the passion, the reason why you're doing the thing that you're doing, you have to own that. Nobody else is going to own that for you. If your team, as you're starting to grow, you're starting to like bring on marketers, and you're starting to bring on, salespeople and business development people, et cetera, that your vision needs to be super strong, because those are the people in your organization that are now going to be like disseminating the story and getting out there into the world. So all of it's going to come back to, how do they understand the story from you? How do they really get the passion from you, right? The other thing that's really important about credibility is understanding like what actually matters to your customers, right? Like what kind of discovery have you done to really understand exactly what is their problem? When do they have that problem? How painful is that problem? And what other solutions have they actually tried to find to solve that problem, right? Because what you want to know is, are you competing on value? Are you competing on price? Are you competing on color? You could be competing on any number of things. Again, I think about some of the, the pitch presentations that I see, and, the founder is talking about like how much cheaper the thing is that they're doing, but I don't actually know if that matters to their customer. So what matters to your customer should be the thing that you are actually wrapping your credibility around. You have a question?
I have a good example for leaders who you just said, like, for example, let's say there's some guy, they have a fever and a really bad fever and they're suffering, they're in pain. You can give them the vitamin or you can give them a painkiller. Which one would they more like buy? Would they buy the painkiller or they would buy the vitamin? They'll buy the painkiller because the vitamin is something that's nice to have, but not necessarily what they need at the moment.
That's awesome. Exactly. You've got to really show that you are essential to solving their problem. That's a great example. Thank you for that. Yeah, so that's basically, why should your customer buy from you? Knowing your audience, right? So again, like really, like what is it that matters to your audience? Well, that's what they need to see in your store. Are they cost conscious? Is that the thing that really matters? And if that's the thing that matters, that's really the only thing that you should be focused on, right? Are they customer service oriented? Is the problem that the current way for solving their problem is like, a black box, or, it's just a chat bot or whatever the case may be, and they actually need to connect with a human, right? Or, there's a known time delay for, whatever the regular response rate is to solving for a certain problem, right? So are they customer service oriented? Is that the thing that's really important to them, right? Are they looking for something that's like high quality and they'll pay? And that's what I mean about like, is it price that you want to be competing on? Is it quality? Is it efficiency? Get super clear on the thing that really is a problem, because that is going to make sure that you are targeting the right audience with your story, right? And really thinking about that demographic as well. So the language that you use, or your, choice of font and visual and all those kinds of things, right? Really should reflect the audience that you want to connect with, right? And the thing with language, it's really important. I know I referenced this a little bit earlier, but if you have complex language around what you do, you really want to find ways to simplify it, right? You don't want to be jargony, because people don't connect with jargon. As I shared, they may be passing your information on to someone else, and so the jargon is just, going to get lost. Also, it takes way too long to like, say a sentence that's got 1,000, words in it versus something that's half of that. So really thinking about the way in which you're connecting with people and keeping it accessible, and language has a lot to do with that. And the other thing that's important here in thinking about your audience, I don't know if it's on this slide here. Yeah. So, really thinking about
Sure.
a real broad mixture of people in the audience, different from if you were just going and speaking with a customer and that they have a very like clear idea of what it is that they're expecting to hear from you, right? So when you think about that hook, right, you want to be thinking about the audience that you're connecting with. And the fact is that the hook itself may not change from one audience to the next. It's going to resonate different with different people, but you certainly want to be thinking about what is that hook that's going to resonate most with that audience that you're actually speaking to. And it can be any number of things. The other important thing is that, when you are having conversations with investors, or you're having conversations with customers, or you are in the New Ventures BC competition and you are having conversations with judges and mentors, every time you go into a room, never assume that somebody knows what it is that you're doing, or that they've heard your story before, because you don't know that. You also don't know what they may have remembered the last time you think that they heard what you said. And I would say that's something that's really sort of stuck out for me, even still with the UBC ventures as well, and some of the sessions, is that the ventures would be like, do I have to tell my story again? like, again, yes, you want every opportunity to tell your story over and over and over again. Why? Because you never know who's going to resonate, the most. There's a customer in all of us, and somebody always knows someone that knows someone else. And the more you practice and the better you get, you're getting feedback, right? If you do a pitch and it like completely flatline, that's awesome. Because now you know what not to do next time around, right? Every time you tell that story is a learning opportunity. And so having that hook and being clear with that audience is really important, but it's fluid and it's going to evolve over time. And the other thing that's important to remember is that the story that you're telling today and the story that you're telling in 5-10 years from now actually may change, hopefully, because your business will have grown, right? But the why isn't going to change. The authenticity of the story isn't going to change, right? So it's really important to think about, again, the positioning and being super targeted, right? And being super clear and making sure that people can really connect with what you're doing right now. What are you doing today to solve the problem today? That's the conversation that you need to be having, even if in your mind you're like, world domination in 10 years. Like, you've got to dial it back because you've got to make it believable.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
About the credibility you mentioned in the beginning? Y Combinator, I'm sure you're familiar with them, they always recommend that you talk about your startup by saying, I am building the next, this life, maybe the Netflix, like you always have to mention a company that someone can always relate to. And now, seems like you should not be doing that.
Well, I personally think that's a terrible idea, but that's my opinion.
I kind of understand why.
Because brands go in and out of favor all the time. And Twitter is a great example, right? Twitter is now X. So imagine if all you ever did is said, we're building the next Twitter, and people are like, Twitter, ooh, or is that even a thing anymore? So I appreciate that advice. For one thing, people are going to give you lots of advice. Take it however is going to work best. I certainly, there's lots of wonderful storytellers out there that have lots of great ideas. I'm one of them. But what I will note is that the more you compare yourself to other companies and other things, then the more they're thinking about that and not thinking about you. And so the first thing that you need to do is get really clear about what you're doing and also get really excited about what you're doing, right? I will say probably less so today than maybe even 5-10 years ago. Technology and so many things about technology are far more mainstream today than they were even like 5 years ago. Like, I think I don't actually, when I leave my house, I only take my phone. I don't even take my key anymore because I can open my door with my phone. I can pay with my phone. I can talk on my phone. I can have a meeting with my phone. So many things have changed, right? Whereas there was a time when people were like, iPhone? What's an iPhone? And then you would probably need to give them something that they, would find relatable. So that's how I've always looked at the situation.
I just
Yeah.
want to add a tidbit to the gentleman's suggestion. That advice that was given to Y Combinator was given to me when I was there as a Y Combinator startup employee 7 years ago. So that is a 7-year-old advice that was handed out. And I don't know if they changed it, updated it, but technology wasn't like that, as compared to today.
Awesome. I think I may have skipped. Did I skip one? Yeah, okay. Oh, hello. Okay, so what I wanted to kind of note here, right, is like how we think about ensuring that our stories are human-centered, right? So if your story starts out that in our research, we looked at the relationship between this and this, and we found this. And that is why we are doing the thing that we are doing. Not nearly as exciting as like, what if every day you had something nagging at you that you couldn't let go, right? So when you think about your story, when you think about your audience, when you think about that hook, you really need to catch people at hello, right? So that's got to be the number one focus, whether it is a data point, a statement, whatever the case may be, but you have that one shot to make a first impression and you really want it to be memorable. I am a data-driven storyteller. I've been a data-driven marketer since the beginning of time because things change so quickly. How do we even know that something's ever worked, right? But the thing is, you can't always just rely on the data to tell a story, right? You actually need to be able to show how something is being impacted. So if the thing that you're doing is, solving a world crisis by X%, that's a great place to start. But that's not the only part of the story. Now you need to fill out the rest of the story, right? And how is it that you're actually making an impact on that data point? Why should we actually even think and remember that data point, right? Why does that matter to me? Because we're going to solve the problem around that data point. And that's where those two things start to come together. And now you're really starting to roll out an awesome story. So really making sure that you can show how your solution is going to impact real world solutions. And nobody should ever feel that their solution can't actually address this question. Again, I have bore witness to some of the most complex, technical solutions that inventors are inventing at a university, but they've been able to make it relatable to me because they found a really good hook. They found a really good story. I might not be the person that's actually counting seeds to know if a seed is good seed or a bad seed, but what they're doing is so massively important. Sign me up. I'm going to tell everybody I know about the thing that they're doing, right? So you can always find a real world scenario of why the thing that you're doing actually matters. I think I saw your hand up.
So I go back and forth with this all the time. We're selling a B2B solution it's a legal solution for sales teams. And so this is very specific. And if you're not a sales team with this bottleneck, like you're not the person who I necessarily need to talk to. And you're probably not the person who wants to be talking to me anyway. So how do you balance having a very broad thing that's like, oh, this is a great story I want to listen to. Hey, why don't we not waste each other's time and keep talking and move on?
Yeah, for sure.
How do you balance that?
So that's a great question. And I think it really comes down to knowing who your audience is. So the very specific piece of your story that matters, you're going to be telling that to somebody who you want to buy your solution. So you got to get super clear, super fast with the language and the piece that matters to them, right? But if you're in a room full of investors and they're like, well, we like legal tech startups, or legal tech software, then you're like, your legal bill, they're charging you, in 6-minute increments because of XYZ, and we're solving them, obviously making that up, right? But the point is I've taken something that, well, the specific part of it doesn't matter. They can connect to the fact that I'm solving a problem that they probably do experience, which is that lawyers are very expensive.
Yeah.
Right? So really knowing who that audience is, you can be super clear. Is it an investor? Is it a customer? Is it a strategic partner? Is it a person I want to hire for the company? Right? If it's a person that you're hiring for the team, sometimes it's a little bit of a blend of things, right? Like you need people to join your company to do something very specific, and they need to be very excited about that specific thing, but they also need to buy into the bigger picture, right? Because they're going to be like coming in every day or answering emails, at whatever time. And so they've got to be really excited about the bigger picture, right? So when we think about our storytelling, we think about our positioning, and I mentioned, you can create sort of like 4 or 5, positioning statements, like the big one, and then like the specific one. And then what are the pieces in between that you're filling out as you're telling that story? And this just sort of, again, reinforcing here, like lead with the human elements, right? Why should I care? Why does it matter? Like make me feel something. And then you will be able to get to the more technical pieces. You'll be able to get to the thing that you really do, but you've kind of got to capture people's attention and get them to sort of like, now want to hear the next part of the story. And that's often, the most challenging thing, because you could start a conversation and get a no right off the bat, and it's really hard to come back from that, right? So getting alignment and ensuring that there's alignment on the why can make that conversation so much better. This one here, we kind of covered that. Okay. Okay. So now I want to get into some of the tactics for storytelling. And I've alluded to this a little bit, but I cannot emphasize enough how much emotion can play a really big part of your story. And I appreciate, again, legal software, where's the emotion? It doesn't mean that you can't make people laugh. It doesn't mean that you can't make people curious. And, it doesn't mean that you can't expose, anyone's vulnerabilities. So never think that for a moment that there isn't an opportunity to really integrate, something that's going to make people feel something, right? And that's one of the things that's going to be kind of part of that hook as well, right? And how do they feel about the experience in connecting with you, right? Were you authentic? Were you, maintaining eye contact? Were you ensuring that you paused and, answered a question, asked a question for clarification, right? So connecting with people and ensuring that they really feel that authenticity is in you, but also in your story. So as we're going to get into sort of our last bit here and kind of practicing these things, right? Thinking about what are some of the key words that are important to wrap your story around, right? So, again, having the experience of hearing lots of really big and long-winded stories and that type of thing, I often will go back to the founder and it's like, if you had to pay $50,000 for every word that you used, how much money you're actually willing to spend on telling your story. So think about the fact that words are precious and people only have so much time, and you want to pick the best words that best tell your story. It doesn't have to be a lot of words. It needs to be clear. And it absolutely needs to be words that are going to invite curiosity, that they want to learn more. They want to learn more about all the things that you're doing. And so really ensuring that there's that simplicity there, it just sort of grounds that story. Eye contact, as I mentioned, whenever you're out there telling a story, you really want to make sure you're connecting with people. That's that authenticity, right? And it's okay if you are, if you get nervous energy before you're going to get up on stage and present. All that stuff is okay. If you, forget what it is that you're going to say, which I do all the time, or you, back and forth on, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Maintain eye contact, be authentic, and you show that vulnerability. People love people. And I would say that in our community here in Vancouver in particular, there's a lot of love in this community. So when you go and you present, you're participating in new ventures or you're participating at Web Summit, like people are there in the room and they actually want to see you succeed. Right? So it's okay, to not be perfect all the time. That's not what it's all about. You want to show people that what you do is you bounce back well, you recover well, you are resilient. You're so passionate about the story that you're, tripping over all those words, and people will see that in you, right? And that's okay. That's a really great place to start. Okay. So again, kind of going back to putting these things together and thinking about how hardwired we are for stories, right? So as I mentioned, a story is an invitation for someone to participate in something bigger than themselves. So all this stuff I've been talking about, the why, the how, the authenticity, the hook, all those kinds of things, right? They need to feel like they're gonna, move the needle forward by whatever problem they're able to, help solve, right? People do want to be part of stories. They want to be part of like addressing the atrocities that we're experiencing all over the place, and people will want to do their part in that. If the thing that you're doing is really going to help them move forward, it's really going to help make the world better for them, then they're going to want to participate in that. The stories that do the best are the ones that really show you have a deep understanding of your customer. I often, again, in any of the presentation sessions, whether it's with new ventures or, UBC or, VF or whatever the case may be, right? I am often amazed that founders haven't become obsessed with customer discovery, if I'm honest. How many people did you talk to? 4. Why? Well, we 4 is good enough, or, people were busy, or any excuse in the book, right? The thing is that your customers and the growth of your business, they live and die on your story. And that means that the more people that you're talking to, the better information you're getting, the more you're growing. Every conversation you have with somebody that says no teaches you something. Every conversation you have with someone that says yes teaches you something. Like there's literally no way to lose on any of that. And never be afraid to ask for feedback, right? If you're talking to a customer or a potential investor and, they're just not, they're not picking up what you're putting down, don't be afraid to say, you've made a really interesting point. I'd love to learn more about why, you think this versus that. And the more you can get people to open up to you, the more it's going to give you some revelations about, is your story even landing? Did they not quite get the thing you were really getting at? Did you think that they wanted to hear something that in fact you've now learned that they don't want to hear? Because had you done better customer discovery to begin with, you would have had a far more focused story, right? So the more we have these conversations, right, the better we get. And that is going to allow you to ensure that you're really connecting with the right customer at the right time. So really thinking about that the customer is at the center of your story. It's at the center of your brand. That's the only thing that really matters, right? The obsession with your customer is the thing that's actually going to allow you to move your company forward. I'm just going to pause you for a moment. I'm almost done here, and then I'll take some Q&A. The other thing that I like to note as far as the value of customer feedback is you can use that in your story. Some of our customers said XYZ. We spoke with, 20 people and whatever, 10% of them said XYZ, right? You can actually use the conversations and the feedback from your customers in your story. It doesn't get any better than that because then they're doing all the validation for you. Okay. How am I doing for time? 50 minutes? Okay, great. All right. So just kind of going back to some of the messaging objectives and really thinking about what it is that you want to accomplish. So the connection, the clarity, the conversions. So getting really clear on these objectives as one of the ways in which you start to frame your story out is really important. So what kind of connection do you want to have with people, right? And again, I talk about that emotional connection. You may not feel that the thing that you're selling is going to give people the warm and fuzzies, but then maybe the emotional connection is like, a great joke or a compliment that you can provide or whatever the case may be, right? But really find a way, I think I skipped ahead here, really find a way to actually like have a connection with people that they need to know that you're present. Because that can often happen, right? Like nervous energy, talking to an investor, going in and having a conversation with a customer, and now you're just in like sales mode, you're just like in pitch mode, and you're just like trying to get through it and try to remember all the things that you have, in your power. It can be very overwhelming, right? So when you establish that connection, it just gives you that moment to go, okay, I'm here, you're here, we're gonna have a conversation, take the pressure off the pitch, and just have a conversation. And if you don't remember everything that you want to say, that's okay. You can always go back to it, right? Engaging in those authentic conversations is the thing that's going to get people to open up to you. And when they open up to you, they're actually going to reveal an awful lot of information that's going to help in that conversation, whether it's potential investment or whether it's something that you're actually trying to sell, right? That kind of connection allows you to establish alignment, right? You want to be able to ensure that the person you're having a conversation with actually sees you as an ally, right? As a partner, not as somebody that's trying to sell them something, right? And even quite frankly, when you're pitching investors, which is a crazy power dynamic, which I'm sure many of you have experienced, find the equal ground. Everybody has a job to be done, right? Your job is solving this problem here. Their job is making sure that you can do it by investing into you, right? So the jobs to be done is also a great equalizer. That alignment is really important, and always be a good listener. So when you have conversations with mentors, investors, potential customers, don't be afraid to ask for feedback. Even if they sat through the entire presentation and thought, I don't know what they thought, but they didn't respond, ask them for feedback. Any questions? I read something over here and I thought maybe we could talk a little bit more about that. What are your thoughts? Right? There's any number of things, but get that conversation going and get them, if they can give you some feedback, it also takes the pressure off of them feeling as though that they have to like say yes or no about being sold something. That alignment is really important. And as I talked about before, your 10-word impact statement or whatever that is, like start with one sentence and then kind of build from there and keep it consistent, right? Make all of the interactions that you have count, whether the interaction is in person, whether the interaction is online, whether the interaction is a social post, or whether it is, a blog post or something that you are writing in an email, right? But you want to make sure that you're consistent and that you're clear and that you're accessible with that language, right? As I mentioned before, that's a very important objective, right? Thinking about also, if you've been having conversations with customers or investors and like you're getting a lot of no's, like make a list of the reasons why they're saying no and try to figure out how you can answer those questions, right? And making sure, did you lose them because you weren't consistent with something, because something that you said wasn't accessible? Are your messaging objectives to, build awareness, right? You're just doing some brand building. Nobody knows who you are. You want to start to get your brand out there. So you're doing some social media and whatnot, leaving some business cards out. Maybe you've got some swag or whatever the case may be. Is your objective in any of the conversations that you're having just to build awareness? And if that is all, that is awesome. That is absolutely enough. But maybe your objective is more building your marketing funnel, right? Building community, actually generating interest with people, right? Thinking about how you're doing that. If you have a website, do you have a call to action for people to sign up for a newsletter, right? If you are, starting to build a social following, what's the ask, the engagement, right? Like, tag, like, follow, and, I'll send you a white paper, whatever the case may be, right? Like, how are you actually now taking the story and using it to move what you're trying to do forward, right? Are you looking to do lead generation, right? Again, like these are going to be the conversations that are more about now you're really in the sales funnel. Now you're actually talking to the customer and they're going to want to know a lot more information than if you were just actually building awareness. And always, always, always have a call to action. Always. If you're posting something on social, if you're sending out an email, whatever the case, whatever you are, and you have an opportunity to tell that story, even if the call to action is, I'd like to have more conversations. I'd like to meet more people. I'd like to, like, that's awesome. But always have a call to action because that's going to allow people to continue to engage with you and want to know more about your story. We've talked about our storytelling in sales pitches, website, blog, news announcements, social media, investor pitches, job descriptions, the whole 9 yards, right? All of these things, they're all rooted in the why. They're all rooted in the how. They're all rooted in the what. They're all rooted in that first 10-word statement that you are now building out from there, right? You are making sure that you have a data point that sells, that you're really connecting with your audience. And these things might, they're going to look a little different in different places. But when I create a piece of content, I like to think about all the different ways in which I'm going to repurpose that content. So a really great blog story as an example, right? And then I can pull out something that I want for social media, or, I'm going to pull out something as a tagline on the website, or, that's going to be part of my news announcement, right? So when we're thinking about writing our stories, like go all in, build that story, and then you can start to sort of think about where you want to tighten things up, or what is the audience, or where is the channel that story is actually going to live. And that way you can make sure in this process, you want that consistency, right? It's very easy, especially, startup founder, scrappy, you are doing all the things all the time. And you might not remember that you made a change to your logo here, and then you forgot to update it over here, or you made a change to something it's real, it will happen. So when you think about, the consistency of that story, it's going to make it much easier to ensure that it's consistent across all of your channels. And you may need to keep a spreadsheet or whatever the case may be to track those kinds of things, but the consistency is really important because people will find you in different places. And the key is the message gets reinforced when they see you and your brand appearing over and over and over again. All right. So we're just pretty much, I think, almost coming to a bit of a end here and going into our activity. But the last thing I kind of wanted to go over here are just thinking about more of the story building blocks, right? So many of the things that I have been sharing with you today are kind of the landscape and the things you really want to be thinking about as you're framing out that story. So now we're going to kind of walk through the story, right? So every story has a hero. Who stands to gain from your situation? That is the hero of your story. Oftentimes, the solution, the company, the founder, they think that they're the hero because they're the one going in and solving the problem. You're not the hero. The customer is the hero. Because when they win, you win, they're your customer. It's really important to be super clear. The customer's got to be at the center of everything. They are the hero. The villain is the terrible problem that's being solved. It's the foe that your hero is fighting every day, right? You got to be super clear on who their villain is. Your roadmap. How are you going to solve that problem? How are you going to take them by the hand and walk them down the yellow brick road and actually lead them to the solution that they're looking for? How do you really understand all of their pains, right? So you need to be super clear on the problem that you're solving, but that problem is nuanced, right? The problem will become more painful when you understand more about a day in the life of your customer, right? How are they experiencing this terrible villain? What does pain feel like as they're being stabbed to death every moment of the day because of this terrible problem that you're going to be able to solve? What are the gains? What are the actual benefits that are going to empower your hero, right? What's going to solve the problem? What's going to make it better? What's going to make them look even like more of a hero than they were before? Your solution to their problem, you are empowering them. And that relationship that you have with your potential customer is really important to understand. You are empowering them. That alignment, really important. So, as I've noted here, just a few tips in thinking about, what your story script should include: hero, villain, the one desire your customer has. Really, again, weaving in those discovery insights whenever you can. What's preventing them from getting what they want? What are the benefits to your solution? And all of this is what should actually lead you to having 3 to 5 key messages, right? So a lot of stuff, but really you want to distill it down into 3 to 5 key messages that you can really kind of build on from there. Okay, I think I'm going to, yes. Okay, before we get into our exercise here, I am going to take some questions or comments. Yeah.
All that you just said, all in 60 seconds?
No, that's. Don't worry about that just yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
But you're not wrong. Yeah.
Or even paying customers, or some of the best way to get them to find like the person.
Well, that's a really big question, probably for a totally different session. But if you have a problem that you're solving, you should know who has the problem. That will tell you where your customer is. So I would sort of start from there. Yes.
So earlier you're talking about credibility, and I've always seen this as a bit of a balance between credibility, over promising versus under delivering, and you kind of want to do the opposite, right? As a startup, you're trying to be the best at what you do, but you're not yet the best at what you do. So, I'll use our example for instance. Our manual playbooks reduce legal costs by 60 to 80% for transactions. But I don't want to tell someone like, we're going to reduce your legal bill by 80% annually, because that's over promising. We have no idea where they're at. So how do you balance basically the potential versus what you can do today and craft that into the story that doesn't ruin your credibility and just sounds like you're overinflating what you can actually do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a couple approaches that I would consider. First of all, in the early days of building a business, if you can find somebody that actually experiences the pain so intensely that they want to be part of helping you build the solution, and look for a partner that you can be doing some piloting with, right? And that's obviously a big bet, because it really is about a relationship that you're building. But I think it's really important to consider, what's a first strategic partner or strategic ally that you can find that actually can help you work through some of these things, that you have the ability to be super honest with them, right? And that can happen at, everything from hey, I've got this idea. Do you think you'd just, kind of give me your ear, all the way through to, I've been building this relationship with you. I understand the problem that you have. Here's what we're coming with. I want you to try it out and give me some feedback, right? So that opportunity that you can take to build that kind of partnership can really help with the credibility, because now you're going to have a pilot for one thing, and you're going to have an authority give you some testimonials, and they're going to give you some honest feedback that's only going to make it better and better. And then every time you go and talk to the next person, you can actually incorporate that story. So, we're just kind of getting started. We have this really great partner right now with XYZ firm. Here's some of the things that we're working on. Love to have a conversation with you about how we could get you onboarded as well, right? It's okay to have that level of authenticity there. Knowing who your customer is and knowing who you're going in and having a conversation means that you probably know some of the answers to the problems that they have, right? So when you're going in and having a conversation, it's I just kind of want to get a sense from you, to what magnitude is this problem that you're experiencing? And they might be oh my God, every day, all day. And it's okay, well, that's really great, because that kind of validates what I want to talk to you about today, right? You can use your customer's experience to open the door to then go, I can solve this, and this is how I'm going to solve it. They have now just told you they have a wild problem. Your job is to show them how you can really solve that problem in a manner that actually invites them to participate in getting that problem solved. And I've seen that work extremely well in so many situations. It's kind of a founder-led growth, kind of concept there.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else? No? Okay.
Online, any questions?
Oh, online? Yes.
circle back. This might be a long answer. But the question is, I would love to hear you expand and distinguish between the how, the what, and the why. To me, this is the core foundation of effective storytelling.
They want me to distinguish between the what, the why, and the how of storytelling.
Yes.
Can I just send them my slide deck? Because it's all in there.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
This far.
Any other questions online? Okay, I want to make sure that we have time for our activity because then we can have some feedback on the other side. So, how many of you are familiar with the concept of an elevator pitch? Have any of you actually gotten into an elevator and given an elevator pitch before? Twice, exactly. Once. Awesome. I love it. So imagine you are in Menlo Park in Palo Alto, where all the, big investment firms live, and you've got like the meeting of a lifetime with Sequoia, and you're just like, whoo, doing a lot of that. And you walk in the building, you walk in the elevator, and who happens to walk in the elevator exactly the same time? Boris Wertz from Version 1 Ventures, right? Vancouver-based guy, hotshot in Silicon Valley. He is absolutely going to be a friend. And now you're like, okay, I'm going to pitch Boris on the way up because I'm going to Boris will put a good word in for me. Maybe he's even going to show up at this meeting. Elevator door closes and you have 1 minute to tell your story heart out in the elevator to Boris Wertz. Elevator stops, doors open, and Boris is like, actually, that's interesting. And Boris repeats back to you exactly what he heard and understood from you as you go to the ground floor. So this is going to be an exercise in concise storytelling, but also an exercise in reflection. Remember, I said at the very beginning, you got to be able to tell a story in a way that somebody can actually remember what you said and tell it back to you, right? If you can do that and they can do that, you've got the beginnings of an awesome story and you're actually creating connection with people. So this is where we're going to get interactive here. I'm going to ask you